Hey everybody, welcome to Noise Podcast. Today we have Kat Noone with us. We almost lost her in a storm and we almost lost her with technical difficulties today, but it's really good to have her on the show. Hello Kat and welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me.
How are you, Woo?
So good.
Awesome. Kat, we really wanted to get you on the podcast for two reasons, really. Firstly, because you're a founder and a designer, which is sort of fundamental to how I think the future of tech is going to go generally. And secondly, because you're sort of a prolific side project maker. And I've kickstarted loads of things in my past, and some of them have failed, some of them has been relative success. But we'd like to get your insights on those things. But to kick things off, we'd like to talk more about founding your own company. You've sort of jumped into a few projects, but now you're focusing on Iris. And it'd be great for you to just give us sort of the one-liner about what Iris is and what you're looking to achieve.
So actually, I'd be wrong to say that that's main focus, but yes, it is main focus. My time design has gotten me to a point where I can power focus on each of them, which is good. But it took me about now 3 years to get to that point. But to go back and answer your question, Iris is a product, or it's for iOS. It's a product in the health. I guess you can consider it, health tech, healthcare, and it helps you track and understand your daily health. So everything from medicinal tracking and reminders to understanding your heart rate to jotting down notes when you're at the doctor's office, and obviously building from there.
You sound like you said just took you 3 years to get this to this stage where you can focus on many things at once. That makes me think you're ruthlessly efficient.
Now I am. now I can say that with the utmost confidence that I am viciously efficient when it comes to my time design. Yeah.
What sort of methods, any processes, or is it sort of your own rules here?
Well, I co-founded my first company back in 2013, and it's been this like whirlwind into where I am now with building Iris, Stark, and Lyra. And in between then, so much happened. I moved back from Germany to the States. I became a mom. I became a mom to a baby, and then a baby that became a toddler that was walking and required different things than a baby needs. So, There was so much transition that happened, and in between that, building these products that would become companies, because that's the goal, right? You start off with this side project, you see whether it works, it becomes this product. The product is doing well, it becomes a company, and all throughout that, and all the while still momming and being a partner and being a granddaughter and a friend. I also became the person that many people were asking me what to do, and I also had to learn how to be in charge, because running a design team was very different than running an entire company. So, and though the companies are small, there are still things on the marketing and design and engineering side that need to be done. So at one point I got to the point where my anxiety was through the roof. I was completely overwhelmed. I didn't know what the hell I was doing. And, all the while everyone's praising and saying, oh, this is great, all of these projects. And it's just like, I need we don't talk about failure a lot, and we also don't talk about these things that are the not great side, but I want it to be like, hey, everyone, yes, I'm glad you love it. I'm failing on the personal side. I'm a shit friend. I'm a shit partner. I feel like I'm not being a good mom. And it just got to this point where I'm like, you shouldn't, this is what I want to do in my personal life, and this is also what I want to do in my professional life. I need to figure out how the hell to fix this. And between business coach / therapist / whatever, it was just you gotta work on that time design, otherwise you're gonna kill yourself. And so sat down and actually figured out what happens when, and was also ruthless about when the work stops. So if someone wants to have a meeting at 5:30 or 6 or whatever on a weekday, it's just like, no, sorry, I don't do that.
I think some of the
Um,
best advice that I've ever heard ever was that time is like the only currency that you can't get back. So
yes.
like what you say about like being ruthless about it is like so incredibly important to like not only to yourself, but to people around you too, right? Because you're a mother, you know, you have all these other things going on too. Like you have all these responsibilities, right? So like being able to say no is like super important.
Yeah, and also to the projects, somebody asked me the other day, like, hey, would you be interested in jamming on something with me? And I'm like, no, no. I love the idea. I'd be happy to give you advice or feedback along the way, but I literally don't have the bandwidth. And I'm at a place now where, like, I like saying no because I know what I get in return for that. I know that that correlates to peace of mind and me time. And that's the thing, like nobody really accounts for the fact that, like, I'm saying no to you because that's probably the only 2 hours in the day that I have to myself. And if I want to stare out of the goddamn window and just look outside, then that's what I'm going to do because my day was just jam packed. And so, and that's I think time design, like with anything, whether it's service design or, marketing, whatever, it needs to be refined as you go along. So um, for me, when my daughter was not in preschool, I was getting about anywhere from 2 to 4 hours of work done during the day. And that would mean in the evening I had to work as well. But those were the most productive hours ever because I was constrained. I knew that if I didn't get the work done in this time, it wasn't getting done. And
Mm.
that across 3 projects, nope. Like it doesn't work if there is not any um, extreme focus.
That's actually a really interesting point because I think a lot of times when I'm at the workplace, I think a lot about constraints because I have all these goals set. I have, these tickets, these sprints. Like it's a very defined wall that I have to get done. And I can just destroy that like every time. But then I go home and I try to do the same thing, but I don't have those time constraints where I don't say like, hey, I have like an hour. I mean, yours is like, obviously, like if you don't do it in that hour, it's like, like you have other things like children and other
Mhm.
things to take care of. So tiny humans are a little bit more important than some of my stuff. But but the point being is that it's kind of interesting that you have these constraints set up in that way, and that's helped you kind of like finish stuff from what I'm gathering.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Which is why when everyone says, like, or I don't want to say everyone, that's a generalization that doesn't help anybody. But um, when so many people say, like, there's hesitancy around hiring parents, whether it's a mom or a dad, that they're worried that it's going to impact their work negatively. I'm like, dude, they're the most productive
Yeah,
people ever.
it's the
Absolutely.
opposite.
Yeah. And I didn't, I knew that before being a parent, but I didn't really know
Yeah.
like what
Sure.
that would feel like. Um, yeah, and now working across 3 projects, tasks are set up between days. There are some days where I'm working on, like one day per project, or a couple of days per project. It all depends on what's going on. Every Sunday or Monday morning, I'm working on my schedule for the week, and the general like work blocks stay the same, but what gets done in those main like 3 tasks and then subtasks that can follow are all relative to what that sprint is like, or for each project and whatnot, and the demands. But um, another thing at this point that I did now that my daughter's in school is that after dropping her off, Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays are gym, and then work, and then Tuesdays, Thursdays, and every other day in the morning before work is reading. So 30 minutes to an hour of reading, and then I get to work.
What are you reading
Is
right
that
now?
yeah, good question.
Sorry.
um,
Sorry.
so a few things, but one that I'm really digging into is called Being Mortal.
Hmm.
It's
Okay.
just yeah, it's about this the way we perceive and handle death
Mm.
as a society. Everything from like the ending of someone's life to, just the entire like health related, medicine related side to it. Obviously,
Sounds like
an
a light
interest.
read.
Yeah. Completely like nothing daunting about it.
Perfect for the morning.
Yeah. So for me, it's a main focus because of Iris. So our initial target group and who we're focused on right now, and when we'll launch version 2 is the like we call the user group like newly retired. So it is geriatrics at the end of the day, and it's a very underserved and misunderstood group of people. And so yeah, I'm doing everything I can to better understand the mindset of that like, and I don't want to say end stage of life, but like those last like 4 or 5 years before things start to
The autumn.
yeah.
Do you think that you chose this book because you knew that it was going to impact the way you'd approach the company, or someone recommended it, or did you just think, hey, this looks like a really cool thing, and then be like, oh, that actually sounds like a good way to talk to our users?
So, depending on the book, this particular book, I saw the topic, and was like, okay, this would definitely help me better understand. But I also choose books. I'm usually swapping between about 3 or 4 books at a time, and I try to pick books that can help me understand the world better, understand my work, understand me. And so like I'll have a tech related book, or like I'm reading Being Mortal, but I also have like on my stand Hello World. The other is Bad Blood, which I think is tech, but it's also reading as this like completely insane novel, because it pretty much is. And so yeah, I think for me it's like, how do I read something that's light and I can get completely lost in, like a Harry Potter, or something that helps me better understand, you know, a group of people pertaining to one of the projects that I'm working on.
So you had mentioned a second ago about knowing, yourself as well too. How much do you think that affects the work that you do? Because a lot of times what we do is, we go out there, we research, we look at all this information from other people. But what I'm finding recently, at least personally, I don't know if this is like, I'm kind of curious what both of your guys' answers is, but being able to know yourself kind of helps you understand users better too, because it kind of like, I don't know how to describe it. Like you're more aware of their intentions and where they might go with something, or like the direction you might want to take a product to. So I'm curious how much you guys think that self-awareness, or EQ, which is emotional intelligence, has to do with like other users as well.
I think it's paramount to be reading, watching, listening to other genres of media. And I don't really enjoy reading business books or tech books. I enjoy reading sort of classics and things from before tech was even a thing. Just because the way you approach a problem and the way you construct a story can be different, and you can learn so much more about how you approach a problem in the office. It's just how I enjoy spending my time out, because I think I just get so frustrated with always looking at the same things over and over again.
Sure.
Yeah.
What about you, Kat?
No, I completely agree. I think a good comparison is like, as a designer, you have these different stages that you go through, and I find the more I went up in I guess my skill set as a designer, the more and the better questions I asked, and the more I was keen to debunk my assumptions than I was to prove them. And I think that's kind of the way I approach me too. For a long time, I think, and I think this is just a general age and maturity and how you're raised and whatnot. A lot goes into who we are. But a big one is obviously the demons that we carry with us and those patterns that we're given as children. And we have to work for a long time to get rid of them. And so that's still a journey that I'm on. And now I find that the more secure I am with myself, the more I can better see other people. Because I see them differently, and that's because I just see them. And it's hard to really see someone without having clarity within.
And with this in mind, as someone who's thinking this way, and also someone who is a designer, and I guess all three of us have worked in companies where design is an afterthought. Is this something you try to instill formally at work, or do you think that it oozes out of you, this sort of design, creative, first thinking mindset?
Well, I think I'm a big proponent of hire for character, train the skill.
Okay.
And for us, like everyone that I work with and that I have the privilege to work with, they're just generally and genuinely good people. And they're also people that are eager to learn and eager to become better just across the board. And I think if that's the case, just this yearning for education and for clarity are things that you can't really replicate. And when you have those two, with a desire to just do better and help people, what you can do with that is limitless. And it just so happens that everyone that I work with has that. And so I'd like to think that my learnings and the conversations that I have with everyone play a role in that. But I think that I've become really good at bringing people on board. So hiring, which I was also pretty shitty about for a long time. But again, stages. I'm hiring different people because I'm seeing different people. And now I know what it takes. I know what those qualities are like. And yeah, it seems to be going well.
Do you think that you're very upfront about who you're looking to hire, but sometimes for startups in particular, just the amount of people you get applying for jobs is very limited. Has that made it even harder for you to find the right people?
I think working on products and companies that are very mission driven kind of do half the battle for you. But the thing is, there are a lot of people that are underrepresented or minorities that won't reach out often because they haven't discovered your product. And I think we need to do a lot of the work to look for these really great people, because I think with the noise and with people amplifying your roles that you're hiring for and your mission, you're going to get that echo chamber too. So for me, it's really knowing who I want to bring on board and being very diligent about the fact that I want our team to not just be all men, to not be all white, I want people from our team to come across different countries, which we do, to not be these very white, straight men. And I think at that point you get this feeling of completeness, because at that point there's true character in the product. There's diversity, there's a representation for your users that are using your product as well. And I think it just boils down to who do you want to be as a company? What do you want your company to look like? And if it all looks the same, then it sends a very clear message. And yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting that you mentioned that, because some of the people that I think bring some of the best ideas at the companies that I've been with have been from other cultures, and because of the fact that it's not necessarily like one culture is better than another. It's different, right? And they see the world
Yeah.
differently, and all of a sudden now they're bringing up something that you've been so like desensitized to, as like growing up in America, where just like that alone gives you privilege, the fact that you lived in America. Like I came from a country that was communist, that you literally have to get cards to get a certain amount of food, right? And I took that card and I mounted it on my wall to kind of remember where I came from, because that
Right.
freedom that we have here to go to the grocery store and to just
Mhm.
go and buy whatever we want is such a different perspective than my friends over in Poland now. Like I talk to them about, like products that they want or like an app that they want. And it's a different world over there, right? And that's like a whole segment of the population, right? Like Poland isn't alone. It's like part of Europe, and like most of Europe shares the same sentiment. So there's really interesting perspectives that people bring in too because of that. And one thing too that you mentioned earlier that I kind of want to unravel just a little bit before we move on to the next part, is that you said that, and this is like one of those things that's, I think it's so incredibly important. We kind of glossed over it, but you'd mentioned that your questions kind of changed as you matured. And I think that that's
Mhm.
such an important thing to kind of like focus on and to be aware of, is that like number one, like asking the right questions is like one of the most important parts of starting a project. Um, and I'm just gonna, I guess I'm curious how your questions have changed over time too, because I do think that that's such an important thing.
Well, I mean, I think that again, that like the people that I hang around with are also diverse in terms of culture and skin color and who we choose to love and the religions that are practiced. And um, it's not just like, me grabbing a coffee with a random person from the tech industry. It's the people that I keep in my circle. And so having these conversations change, just like inherently change the way I look at the world, along with like living overseas, which will definitely do it. Um, but for me, it just, like I also, side note, if you have not read it, I highly, 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 like times 10 recommend reading Factfulness by Hans Rosling. If you haven't, it's a book that I wish I could buy for every single high school student. Because even now it just changes the way you look at the world. And
Hmm.
when you get out of this, like, I hate to say it, but like this like Silicon Valley mindset, it's just like we don't need another fucking scooter. Like we don't need to bring them back out. Nobody had a problem with them in the first place. Like they're fine. Like just leave, just fine. Everyone can buy a scooter, and like we're making these like big things like about it, like Silicon Valley is the type of place where I think everyone should spend time there, and I think that I spend time there, and it's wonderful. The energy that it gives is great, but it's a bubble, and I think if you can get out of it, then with the skills that you've obtained, I really do think that you can make a dent in the world, and because of all of that, because of the reading that I've done and the crew that I keep around, and what I've seen in my life, I think the questions that I ask, they've changed because I'm willing to debunk them, not prove
Hmm.
them.
And that probably comes with your self-awareness you were talking about too, is like being real with yourself, right?
Yeah, yeah, and also like understanding that, like they talk about in Factfulness, like there are there are ways to approach these things that we do, like size gaps, like really getting things in proportion, not generalizing. When someone, when we see things on the media, which is another thing, I stopped watching the news. Like I stopped reading the news for the most part. And I'm very diligent about what I spend my time reading. like silly things, like even when reading data, like you see a number and it's like, 75% of this group has this, and this, and everyone's like, oh, and it's just like, well, what's the number that it comes with? Like 75% of what? Like, is this really a big deal? Or is this being made smaller than it actually needs to be? And, just like understanding that the world it's better. It's getting better, and slow change is like I approach things from the perspective of like small steps to the big goal. We don't start off running. We don't, like, just literally from birth. Like the way we come into this world is the way that we leave it. Like small, slow, and then all at once. And so I try to take all of these things and put them into this like toolbox. And when I'm working, just try to sit back and see the big problem here, and try to see whether or not the problem is even really a problem. Because I think that's an issue too.
Sure. So what I'm hearing is you're kind of looking at these problems more holistically now. So when you're asking those questions, you're thinking more, trying to be more inclusive, trying to see more inside of yourself so that you can, better reflect like some of those questions back at people and better understand, like the things that are coming in, right? Like this data, like, is this data even valid? Is it a double blind study? Is it over like 1,000 people? Like, where's this data coming from, right?
Right. Yeah, for sure. And I think like in general, I think in general, holistic approaches are just they're better. Even down to the way we approach things at Iris. Like the reason why we even exist is because we think that you understanding you better, you taking control of that data, taking control of your health, even when many doctors are telling you you're not able to, and providing you with this like digital health companion, and assembling this like team for more holistic diagnostics will create a healthier you. And it's just like you look at every step of the way and everything we do, and it's just holistic approaches yield better results, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, 100%. I think that's a really nice place for us to wrap this section up. And my key learnings from our discussion is that recognize you're in a bubble, ask questions about the bubble, and then pop it, and then you'll be in such a better place to move on. Jumping into sort of the next section is more of just generally about your side projects and how we all approach them and why we approach them, and if it's sort of a healthy attitude to have. But firstly, I'd just like to understand what you, as a person, find rewarding about starting new things.
Starting new things. I think that initial startup is filled with so much adventure and curiosity. And I think a lot of people look at the beginning stages of a startup as like really stressful. Like there's so much that needs to be done. And don't get me wrong, it's like a clusterfuck of things that need to be done all at once. But there's so much exploration that gets done, and experimentation, and you get hands-on approach because you get to talk to users at that point. You're still so small. You can hop on a call with them, or you can have an email or message them, and it's immediate, instantaneous feedback to create something better. Like you have immediate answers to the problem, and you get to take these answers and like distill it down because some people don't know how to explain or articulate. And so for me, I love that. I love deconstructing and reconstructing these problems and finding a really great solution, and then putting it out there. And I think that's where the allure comes in.
And do you think that it's as things progress in the startups, the businesses, the ideas, that you lose interest, or do you think you just let's look at them differently?
No, there's no interest lost. I wouldn't say yes to something if I thought I was going to lose interest. The reason why I juggle a few projects at once is because I think it makes me better. It gives me time, even if it's just like subconscious mind shift, to focus on something else, even for, like albeit 24 hours, and come back to something, or be in the middle of working on something like a post about like inclusivity, or changing the UI of something on Stark, and being like, now I see why our users in that user group said that. Like, I get that now. Yeah.
And you know what's funny about that is a lot of entrepreneurs actually have that mindset where they love to juggle a bunch of different things. And it's like a double-edged sword, because sometimes it destroys those CEOs or those people that are trying to do those things because they don't know how to balance them. But the ones that get really smart about it, the ones that tend to like figure it out, they're the ones that do really well, right? Like you look at, I mean, this guy's way over referenced, but Elon is a really good example of that, right? Like he's gone from tech startups to like building like he's going to Mars. That's insane. That is crazy. I mean, like, what's that?
He's building rocket ships.
Yeah, like that's crazy, right? But he's the extreme. But there's tons of entrepreneurs that are kind of in that same vein too, where they have a lot of different things that they want to do, and artists are in a lot of ways kind of similar to that too, right? They want to do all sorts of different art, but entrepreneurs in general, I've noticed that a lot about them, where they like jumping between stuff because it kind of gives them insights towards other things, and they see the same problems in areas that people normally wouldn't see those problems, right? Like they like to like deconstruct a thing that's broken and then figure out why people are saying that it's broken, and then actually give them the reason that it's broken, and then put it back together and be like, hey, here's a solution for you.
Yeah. It's funny because quite a few years ago, I committed to only working on things, or only working on products, or whatever you want to call them, projects, that actually aid in the way we connect and better ourselves as human beings.
Mm-hmm.
And again, you find these common things like constraints. I work really well in constraints if I understand the perimeter in which I have freedom in. I know where I can also step out of the box. I just need to know where the box is to know what goes on inside.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, and for me, I've also, piggybacked that with learning when and what to say no to. If it doesn't fit into what I want to work on, what I find most rewarding, I feel like I'm doing the best work of my career now. I'm about 11, 12 years in now. I feel like I'm doing the most rewarding work. Lyra, for instance, we just launched Lyra, which is a symbol-to-speech communication app for children with autism that are nonverbal. I've wanted to work on that since I was 19. I'm 30 this year.
And that's why that product is probably going to succeed, honestly. Because it's those ideas that have been, it will, like, mark my words, I bet you that product is going to succeed, because the stuff that I see succeed the most are those exact projects where, like, I go, and I had this thing, and I talk about it a lot, where I go and I try to take people apart, and I try to figure out like why things that they do work, and it's always the things that they're the most passionate about, and the things that are like, even when they're not working on the project, it's in the back of their brain somewhere, they're thinking about that thing. It's like that first album an artist puts out, right? It's like it's their whole life story, right? It's always the second album that's the hardest, right? Because now you're like onto these other things that, like, I'm still passionate about it, but I might be telling my story in a different way. Now I have to like rethink how I've engineered this idea and stuff too. But I have a really strong feeling that it's going to do well, because of that simple fact of you just saying that you've been thinking about it since you were 19.
Yeah, I mean, so for me, like, specifically with Lyra, to be able to have parents message or email videos of their children, or and children can be any range from 3 to 13 or whatever, but their kids using the product as a means to communicate. At that point, even if they're not verbally expressing communication, when you give someone the ability to communicate you give them a voice and you give them a place in the world to express
Absolutely.
themselves. So if you told me that only that person, has a voice, like, how do you know that the cure for cancer or, the solution to clean water in the world is not with that person who now has a means to actually speak?
100%. I don't know if you've ever
So,
seen the video In My Language. Have you ever seen that? It's like a short
no,
documentary. You will love this. Okay, you need to watch
okay,
this as
I'll
soon as
check
this
it.
is done. And it's
Okay.
about this girl, and she couldn't like communicate with the whole world like at all in any way. And you would just see like at the beginning of the video is just her making these weird noises. She's just passing her hand back and forth between water, and you're
Yeah.
kind of like, what am I watching? And you're like, you're kind of interested. You're like, okay, I want to know more. I want to know what's going on here. And then eventually you hear like, I think like typing or something like that. And what happened was somebody taught her how to type. And then she went from like somebody that looked like they couldn't communicate at all to one of the most prolific, like, and their sentences were so structured and they had better
Yeah.
English than I did. Like it was crazy. They were using like these, just the way that she communicated was just beautiful. And it was such like a mind blowing moment for me, and like completely changed the way that I look at like anybody. So like my girlfriend, she has somebody in their family that has that same problem. They can't communicate. And we always make it a point to like sit down with them and to talk to them, ask them how their day is going, even though we know they can't necessarily like talk back to us.
Yeah.
Like in my heart, I can see that like there's something there, and like they're
Yeah.
like their eyes light up, right? So they might not be able to communicate in the way that we understand, but if you give them a medium, right, like kind of what your app is doing is it's giving them a medium and a way of being able to communicate back to the world, all of a sudden like your view of them changes and they become like more, and I hate to say it this way, but they become more human, right? Because you can now
Yeah.
like you can understand them and you can communicate. It's not a one-way road, it's now a two-way road.
Yeah, that's the thing, I think we as people, we have this need to dichotomize and to put people in groups, us versus them, so and so versus so and so. And it's literally it's a means of helping us understand, like patterns help us understand, but we've gotten to a point where we as especially here in the States society, we see people that don't fit into these categories that we understand as less than.
Mm,
We don't see them as functioning human beings. Because someone can't speak does not mean they don't understand math. It does not mean they don't understand what's happening in the world. And it's just like you know, this is not something that should be. And if there is a technological solution there, why shouldn't it exist?
mm,
Uh,
absolutely.
so so for me, yeah, like those are the types of projects that I'm really diligent about sticking to. And it makes it easier to say no to other things, and it does change the way I work on other. It changed each one changes the way I work on the other. One hand washes the other, two hands wash the face. That's how it always goes.
Mm.
Um, and um, yeah, I'd like to. I'd like to think that they also make me a better person. Because again, changing the people that you're around and the people that you speak with changes your worldview.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
100%.
So how do you think that some of these projects, and now that you're kind of like doing these projects that are like super important to you, how do you think that's changed you?
Oof,
We're just shooting all the
In
easy
a word.
questions at you today.
yeah. Um, I, it, it's people people hop into calls and meetings and coffee and passing you in the elevator, and first question they say is, "Hey, how's it going?" And it's all passing, right? Um, Odds are high. They don't really give a shit. They weren't expecting an answer. They weren't
Yeah.
expecting to ask anything back. But the one thing I always make it a point to say when someone asks as quick as possible to ensure they hear it is I woke up. And I think that's my beginning and end of my day is like I woke up today and I made it to the end. And so all in all, I'm overall grateful.
Hmm.
I have the ability, um, I have the ability to do what I do on a regular basis. I didn't have the best childhood, and um, to kind of sit back and see how far I've come, and what I get to do and who I get to help. Um, all in all, when it boils down to it, like everyone I work with on a team level and the people we get to help and we build these products for, they help me see the world in a light that makes me super grateful for everything that I have. And that's not to say that they have less. That's not like even remotely what I'm implying. But for me, it's grateful that I have the opportunity to speak with them, and help them, and they have the opportunity to make me see differently. They have different lives that I do. They have different struggles, and it's just there's a lot of empathy there, um, and really at the end of the day, like I am grateful that I'm not in a lot of these positions. Um, I have a lot of privilege, and I think it's important to use that. So I
Yeah.
do, and I'm grateful.
Yeah, and I think that when you mentioned that, like your early part of your life was a little bit harder, um, and I find that's another thing too that's very common with people that are successful is adversity was their advantage. Like it really was, as much as like that a lot of that stuff sucks and like it never is like almost ever like a good thing when it's happening.
Yeah,
Like later it gives you perspective of like, wow, like even the fact that we exist 300 billion to one, right? Like you can't even wrap your brain around that. You could be a rock, you could be, like a stuffed animal, you could be a lizard, but instead you're a human, right? Like that's incredible. 300 billion to one. Like that's so crazy to me, right? Like we're here, we're talking,
yeah,
and
yeah,
everybody's like, Louis is over in London, I'm in
yeah.
LA. Like, sorry, where are you from, Kat?
Where are you from? No, I'm in Jersey.
In Jersey?
Yeah, so I'm in the States.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
it's like, I mean, like we're in all different parts of the world and we're talking like the fact that that's even happening, that's crazy
yeah,
already,
abs-
right? Like
absolutely.
not even possible 20 years ago.
Yeah, that's wild to think about, huh? That's
Hmm.
it's wild to see how far, and again, perspective, how far technology has advanced, how far medicine has advanced, what we've been able to do with all of that. Um, yeah, it's amazing.
So the project that you mentioned that you're working on, that you've been sitting on for 10-ish years, what was it that made it appropriate to start now?
Well, funnily enough, so I previous to getting into the world of tech and design, or rather design and then tech,
Mm.
is it one and the same? I don't know. Was I was working in special ed,
Okay.
with children with autism and a variety of different cases, different IEPs, which are individualized education plans. Um, and so for me, like one of the common problems, one of the main focuses that um, a lot of these children had was the inability to speak. They were nonverbal, and early intervention is key. And that doesn't mean that every child will grow up to be someone that can verbally express their any their form of communication. But the methods that were being used were just so dated. They were so archaic, so archaic. They didn't scale. It wasn't something that parents could benefit from at home without going through like this extreme chaos. Um, and there was just no need for that. It was a project though that I had no idea where to start. And I think if I started it then, it would have failed completely. I didn't have the skills, didn't have the knowledge, I didn't have I think the emotional intelligence. You know, fast forward to what year? We're in 2019. Fast forward to 3, 4 years, yeah, 3.5, 4 years ago. Yeah, almost 4 years ago. And and two of my two, three, yeah, two of my co-founders. So two of my co-founders, um, they are the parents of a daughter. You know, their daughter has autism, and she is nonverbal. And March is our CEO, co-founder. He works with, or worked with Ben, who's my partner. And you know, serendipity happened and we connected. I actually knew March before I knew Ben, funnily enough.
Okay.
It just so happened that March was in Berlin, where we were living, and came over, and you know, we got to talking about just life and kids and autism, and you know, he knew that I had this idea and he also had this idea at the same time, and so it was just like, you know, fuck it, let's do it.
Let's do it.
Let's do it, you know, and so, you know, we had the idea from different approaches, and obviously he is going to have it from a different approach. He is the parent of a child with autism that is nonverbal. So it's just like, you know, we had all these ideas and these experiences from different perspectives. And yeah, now a couple years ago, teamed up with Asa, who's our CTO, who Ben and I had worked with previously. And I was just like, let's do this. And fast forward to now.
I think that you're being very modest by saying you didn't have the skills at that time. I think that it's clear that you had the skill to know that you weren't ready at that point, which you probably don't realize. But
Yeah.
I've had tons of ideas, and I've thought, hey, I can't do that. But you knew that you would at one point do that. And I think just to fire one more question at you before we start to wrap things up, what advice would you give to someone who does have these ideas and is probably struggling with the idea of, oh, I don't know if I can do it, I'm not sure if I'm ready? What would you say to that person?
So I have this like list of things that I always go back to and that I always share with someone new, whether it's a new designer, whether it's a new entrepreneur, what have you. One is that you're a beginner, so keep that mindset even when it's quote unquote mastered. Don't half-ass anything. I was raised not to sign my name on anything that is half-assed. I'm a big proponent of jumping off a cliff, because I've seen the bottom, and I think mastery is learned in the valleys, and enjoyment happens at the peak. But that climb will do something to you. I think your work is bad. That doesn't mean that you're a bad person. You know, this isn't personal. Don't take it personal. Again, like ask those, you get to the point where you're asking those different questions. You're trying to debunk your assumptions rather than prove them. And not understanding that they have to go hand in hand. They don't work without each other. Find a mentor. You know,
How would you find a mentor? I think that's a really, really hard question.
ask. Just, you know, I
Simple.
like you gotta be, you can't be afraid of getting told no.
Yeah, so like
Um,
literally find your idol and email them.
yeah, I think like, you know, reach out. You know, social media has made it so easy to chime into conversations and to
Mm-hmm.
connect with people.
Yep.
And I think connection is a place where we feel most excited but most vulnerable. So
Sure.
we retreat, and I know that I am an introvert. I know that. Um, um, but if you get to this point where you're connecting with this person, so like you're favoriting their stuff on Twitter, say, and you're replying to them, and you know, there are people that I followed for years, and I'd like their shit, and I'd reply to them, and you know, didn't really get anything back, and then finally, you know, we're sitting having coffee or we're sitting having a beer, and you know, it's just at the end of the day, they're just people. They're just people that have those same insecurities and
Yep.
those issues, struggles, and but I think if you're genuine about what you're looking for, and again, time design, if they have that time, you have a happy connection at that point. But you can't be afraid to be told no, like it's gonna
Yeah.
happen.
How do you feel like you get the leverage to be able to talk to somebody that you're talking to them because they obviously have more experience, they have more of all these other things. Like what? Because like I don't have much to offer Elon Musk other than my time and maybe a little bit of talent, which he has people just throwing himself at, right? So if I wanted to work for him, like I would probably have to offer to work for free or to like just get his coffee for a while or whatever it might be. Like what are your thoughts on like if somebody came to you and they were like, I really want to work for you? Like what do you think their leverage for working for you would be? Like what would make you say yes?
Well,
Not to say that you would do this. I don't want people
but
like emailing you and being like, hey.
no, no, no,
But
no,
A,
no.
a bribe.
I've had quite a few people that reached out. One person in particular, his name is Dario, and he is a fantastic person. He's talented, and he reached out about Iris, and if he listens to this, hey Dario, and he kept reaching out about Iris, and I'm like, we're not hiring right now, and then he reached out about an internship, and it sparked this questioning in me about like, do you bring on interns if you can't pay them? And I flat out told him like, dude, I can't pay you. I can't pay for this project. I cannot pay you. And
sure.
I do not want you to do this and not get paid. I don't even know if that's legal.
Sure.
But it sparked, I actually, there's this whole ass Twitter thread on this whole thread on Twitter about opinions on whether or not you bring people on, even though they know that they can't get paid, and they still want it and they need that experience. And it's wonderful. It's wonderful insight into how people think about work.
Sure.
Fast forward, there was a job opportunity that came up that, not for us, but for someone else that I think was, amazing. And I introduced them to, I don't know where it went, but I introduced them and I highly recommended him. And so I say all of that to say, even if the opportunity is not there with me or with us, because we are a team, it's not just me, still connect, because like I will help you as much as I possibly can.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, I want there to be an understanding that if I say no, if I can't help, it's because I genuinely cannot.
Sure.
And
Sure.
yeah.
So basically be persistent without being annoying. Is that
Yeah,
right?
yeah. I
Is that
mean,
what I'm getting?
yeah, sure. Just keep trying. People's emails get sunk. They don't read messages. Like, just, yeah, any way you can, just reach out, even if it's just to say hi and start that conversation with it, which I think is a great way. A lot of people reach out and they're like, hey, I saw your work. I think it's great what you're doing. I'd love to be a part of it and help in any way, which I think is a great statement, because it shows that you're just genuinely interested in the mission.
Absolutely.
And there are some projects, like for Stark, we can pay. We have money that we've been given. So grateful
Mm-hmm.
that we could pay anybody that we need. And other projects like Iris, where we can't necessarily do that yet. And then Lyra, we have a full team, so we don't need it. But that doesn't mean that you can't help. And that's what I explained to people when we launched Lyra. I said, a lot of people said, how can we help? I'd love to help on this project, this, that, and the third. And like, you'd be surprised. Like, we have a full team right now, but you'd be surprised at how powerful you going and telling one other person that will tell another person. I said, because everyone knows someone with autism.
Mm-hmm.
And so you'd be surprised, sharing it on social media, or with anybody, like that is oftentimes much more powerful. But yeah, at the end of the day, I think just reach out and like introduce yourself. Like, let's connect, let's talk shop. Like, me being able to sit down and have a coffee with you, if by the end of that coffee I'm like, I want to continue having conversation, I don't want to keep looking at my watch. Like, I don't know what time I have to move to my next meeting. Like that to me, like that's powerful. And
Sure.
as an introvert, I know how hard that is. But that's why it doesn't need to be anything big. Like, so let's sit down and have a coffee, or let's hop on a call.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I think find a mentor. Like, don't be afraid to ask for help. And I think the final one would be like learn the foundation, learn the fundamentals of your craft first. Like, you can't. Um, I'm a big proponent for that and advocate, and I try to get people to understand that, like, you can't paint a house without a frame.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. That's a really lovely way to wrap up. Some awesome advice. I think the lessons from me just there is go down to the valleys like a young Luke Skywalker.
Yeah, there you go.
Go and find your old Ben Kenobi and turn into that Jedi Master that you want to be.
Nerd.
Nerd alert.
Didn't see it going that way? I'm here for it.
And also just ask questions. Go and find the people you admire, ask them questions, and keep being persistent. Thank you so much, Kat, for
yes, thank you.
All these fantastic quotes. We'll be sharing them for sure on our social channels, and taking the time on your busy Sunday afternoon to talk to us.
No, it's not busy. It's chill. It's a weekend. It's chill. So
Excellent.
Thanks for having me.
Still, your time is valuable, and we appreciate it.
I know, absolutely. Likewise.
Thank you very much.
Take it easy, Kat.
Yeah.
Bye. All right. Thanks so much for listening, guys. I hope you enjoyed that one. We just wanted to ask you one quick favor. We work crazy hard to bring the guests on and all the work that goes with it. We only ask you two things. The first one, if you aren't already subscribed, please hit that subscribe button, whatever platform you're using. We're pretty much on all the platforms. And second is to just share it with somebody you think would enjoy it. That's all. It would mean so much to us. Thanks, everybody. Peace.